Okay, we hit that magic number. So greetings. Welcome to the 2020 GRESB Americas Results Event. My name is Dan Winters. I'm the head of Americas with GRESB. And so on this, the first day of the last month of what seems like the longest year of our collective professional lives, I stand before you confident in saying that 2020 sure has been a most eventful and memorable year for all of us. At GRESB, we're most pleased to report that ESG maintains strong market momentum, and you're going to see that from this year's results. So I thought we'd start off with just a quick quarter-by-quarter recap of our year together, right? So in the first quarter, January, February, IREI VIP Americas, ESG Forum by NAREIT, early March, the spring meeting for PREA, all of these events over capacity. Every panel conversation either started with or ended on ESG themes and issues. Then mid-March arrived, bringing a pandemic and pandemonium. The real estate industry began grappling with unprecedented disruption, and all lights on everybody's dashboard, regardless of whatever your professional capacity is, all lights started to blink red faster and faster and faster. That's how we closed the month of March. At GRESB, the second quarter is a very special time, right? On April 1st, we open up the portal. And so I was very pleased, and we were all quite pleased at GRESB that we were able to pivot. And we got that portal open on April 1st. We also were able to move our training online, and we hosted hundreds and hundreds of people that wanted to get started with their GRESB assessment. Simultaneous to all of this, over 50 requests came in from around the globe seeking an extension of this deadline. Once again, GRESB delivered. We were able to reverse engineer and move things from our July 1st deadline to an August 1st deadline, moving contracts and people and capacity around in order to meet what the industry needed at that time. So in the third quarter was not without challenge. The disruption of the pandemic caught up with GRESB too. We were rebuilding the airplane while flying, and some turbulence happened. So to close 2019, or just to back up, right, to close 2019, we were busy. We were busy more clearly separating the management component from the performance component and also the development component. That means, in essence, basically rebuilding the airplane while flying it. What we were trying to do and what we're setting the foundation for the next decade ahead, where ESG impact metrics are more and more relevant and sought after by institutional investors and participants alike. This combination of the workload, the stress, the disruption of the pandemic, and the remoteness of the teams led to a few issues. The great news is that the new review period that we introduced in the third quarter led to 1,230 sets of eyeballs globally, looking at the GRESB results, and that's how we kicked off the fourth quarter. After some rough weeks of some nonstop overtime, we've come back stronger than ever, delivering redesigned benchmark reports for a record number of participants on both the GRESB real estate assessment and the GRESB infrastructure assessment. And if that wasn't enough excitement, we also delivered on a little transaction. The recently announced GRESB management buyout vastly improves our governance. It allows us to acquire resources from an A-list growth capital investor, and it transforms GRESB into an employee-owned and empowered B corporation. All systems are go for the decade ahead. So as we come into our event today, I'd like to welcome our host, Brad Doxer of Green Generation. I note today that we're joined by over 400 registrants for the Americas event. I mean, this is truly amazing. And so Brad, I hope that you're out here. We were trying to get you all set up a couple minutes ago, right? We've got 2 times the capacity of people with us today as compared to last year's New York City event, which was hosted by Alexandria Reed at their great conference space in Midtown Manhattan. So Brad, are you with us? Did we get Brad all set up? Anna, Sasha, how do we do with Brad?
Brad is here. I think he just is setting up his camera.
Excellent. Good. So while we're waiting here for Brad, right, I do have some, I missed the in-person events. And, make no mistake, our current 2D world brings the benefits of some expanded reach and greater ESG engagement. So let me just offer this while we're getting Brad set up, right? A week ago today, we started in Australia. And the GRESB Oceania event surpassed 175 attendees, also their biggest ever. few hours later, we moved to Central European time, where we hosted the GRESB EMEA, the GRESB EMEA results event, just shy of 500 participants. And then it was onwards to Canada, where last Tuesday afternoon, that event attracted 300 plus, also a record huge attendance for Canada. And so along the way, we were able to collectively prove that the sun never sets on ESG progress. Brad, are you with us now? Did we get you all set up?
Dan, I am here. Good morning, everybody.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we have two great teams with us today, the US of A and the Canadian team of All-Stars. Can you offer us some commentary on both what you're seeing out there in the market from a global perspective and what you do on a day-to-day basis, as well as your thoughts on the teams that are gathered here today?
Yeah, Dan, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'm really fascinated by this conversation because in large measure, GRESB has been around for a long time, but what we've really seen in recent days and recent months is an acceleration of the importance of GRESB. And you're going to see six different people here today, six different organizations that are all doing GRESB and doing it very well, but they're all doing it for different reasons. Some are doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. Some are doing it because they know it's going to drive the value of their assets. So the cash flow of the assets, the asset value, the fees, and the promote. Others are doing it because it's allowing them better access to capital markets on a global basis. And others are doing it because they see the importance of environmental issues and ESG issues. Regardless of why these groups have come here, they're all doing it. They're all doing it well. And we're sitting here at a very unique moment. With the change of administration in Washington, we're seeing ESG elevated once again to a primacy position. The U.S. will rejoin the Paris Accord in January. The U.S. is going to re-engage. And so this makes 2021 a very exciting year for ESG, sustainability, and GRESB. And so I'm really excited to be here. We've got six groups that are going to show us the best of what GRESB is all about. And Dan, I can't wait for the puck to drop.
Well, Brad, you and we're going to referee these guys, and some of the banter and lead up to this event has just been amazing. I haven't seen more emotion on display since 1812. It's going to be truly great. So as we get there, yeah, go ahead.
I'm hoping the outcome is a little bit different than 1812, Dan.
Well, we will see. I wasn't around then. I think all sides are doing great still. So, all right. So we've got a great lineup ahead. First, we're joined by my colleague, Roxana Asai, in our Amsterdam headquarter office. She's the GRESB Director of Real Estate. She's going to provide us an overview of the 2020 results. Then we've cooked up a little fun, right? A rematch of the 2018 GRESB Member Summit when the Canadian ESG All-Star team took it to Team USA and captured a 1-0 lead in the series, winning by just a hair of a little maple. Special thank you to Yardi for sponsoring today's event. Yardi is a strong global partner with energy solutions that handle utility building, sub-metering, energy management, and automation that supports client ESG performance. Make sure you check out the Yardi systems for all of your property level data needs. Special, big thanks to Brad. Our goal today is to inform, no pun intended on the goal, by the way. Our goal is to inform, educate, and motivate attendees to greater heights of ESG implementation. Last thing, I'm aware that many of you are in Toronto. Today begins the second week of a 4-week lockdown. Every time I hear Michael Brooks, the CEO of RealPac, speak, he's been very consistent. Don't let your guard down. And to further build on this, don't let the COVID-19 curveball throw your firm off stride with its ESG efforts. If anything, this is merely a practice run for the climate disruption ahead. So settle in. We've got a great program. The coffee is around to the left. The bathrooms are back in the rear. That's a joke, obviously. Let's make the best of our time together here. Some quick housekeeping. If you have some questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to answer as many as we can verbally. I am joined by several of the GRESB staff, also in Amsterdam, who will be answering questions as we go. And we're going to compile and collate all of the questions from all 17 events that we're hosting around the globe. And those will be available on GRESB.com as soon as the events are done. And so when you're on GRESB.com, check it out, because we do have more events and updates happening on a daily basis. inspect GRESB insights. Many of our partners are writing some great articles as to issues and that they're tackling and moving forward. And be sure to sign up for that newsletter. That's how we all can stay in touch. Today's audience, over 400 from 4 different groups. We have institutional investors, which are pension funds and consultants and sovereign wealth funds. The benchmark participants, we have 6 of them making up Team Canada and Team USA, but also many, many, many within the 400 that are with us. Partner organizations, we've got service providers, consultants, and data platforms all represented, and then potential 2021 GRESB participants. We're very curious and want to get involved, moving their organizations forward. So with that now, let's turn our attention to Roxana, who will share the GRESB 2020 results. Roxana, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. Can you also see the right slides?
Perfect.
Okay, we have an excellent starting point. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the introduction. In a weird way, this feels like a very cozy get-together with 400 of our closest friends. I don't know if it's because we've all met like this a few times over the last weeks, or because this crisis has sort of brought us together in a weird way because we share something common, all of us together. Regardless of where we are or what we do, we all go through some of the same challenges and some issues, or because I'm broadcasting live from the GRESB office, which I never thought I would be so excited to say, but it's so special, and I'm so happy to be here after so much time. It's a special occasion. We're not back in the office, but we have a nice setup. I have a nice banner behind me, although I'm not sure if this is a nicer setup than Dan's setup from home. And we're very glad to be able to share this year's results with all of you. My family is on the line, which never happens. So that's another way. That's a different way to connect with one another. And Dan and Brad started their intros by speaking of the ESG momentum at the beginning of the year and how that translated into attendance and participation at events, conferences, signals, and messages that both investors and managers shared in the spectrum of ESG. I think that's very well reflected in the growth path within our investor base. And we're very glad to report that this year, more than ever, more than 120 institutional investors worldwide are using GRESB data, and they're choosing GRESB as the method of communication and of getting the ESG information from their managers and from the companies they invest in. And that in turn leads to a wider level of participation worldwide. We see a nice uptick, more than 20% increase in response rate this year. A lot of that growth comes from Europe. But Americas is a well-represented market with a steady growth rate all around. It's not exactly 22%, but it's very close to it. We see that in Americas, particularly coming from US and Canada, a solid 19% growth this year. And that translates into a lot of dollars and a lot of assets worldwide. In 2020, our benchmark now covers more than 96,000 assets. You see the tiny green dots covering the different markets and the different regions from where they come from. Slowly but steady, we hope to be able to turn this gray map into a completely green map because with the growth of the benchmark comes more access to insights, more analytics opportunities, and ultimately more value to both investors and to managers. And we know it's not easy. It's never been. I don't think anybody can. Well, I think we can say a lot of things about ESG, a lot of things about the reporting processes, but the fact that it's easy is not one of them. We try to make it as smooth as possible, though. Sometimes that succeeds and sometimes that needs improvement. But what we did introduce this year, and we on this transition path towards measuring true performance and real ESG performance at the asset and portfolio level, we introduced a new assessment format. We engaged with a lot of you last year. This year, we heard from a lot of you, not only through the governance groups, but also separately. This year we introduced a new assessment format, namely 3 components that define 2 levels of benchmark, one for standing investments portfolios and one for development portfolios. What you see on this slide is probably a very familiar slide because it's the GRESB model. It's one of the symbolic models that we use to depict the position of each portfolio on the benchmark. And you probably think, well, we've seen this before. It doesn't look very different. And the reality is that if you look at the position of the regional averages, the dynamic between regions stays very similar to previous years. Namely, the global average is very close to the European, Americas, and Asia average, and similar to previous years, Oceania leads the way. However, the GRESB model is no longer built based on the 2 dimensions, management and policy, implementation and measurement, but it's built on these 2 components now that can be completed individually or it can or as standalone components, or they can be completed together and then they lead to a GRESB score and a GRESB rating. Now, zooming into the reason why we're here today, the results in the Americas markets, we also see a little friendly competition or strong competition within Americas. Similar to previous years, we see that Canada has an average score that's a bit higher than the US. I think the rest of the program will sort of decide who the winners of this program's competition will be. And I know Dan has a series of questions to help us decide on some of those winners. So I'm looking forward to that. With that being said, the overall levels of performance are pretty high. One of the reasons why we recalibrated the benchmark this year and we went through this extensive review process of the assessment was also to create a bit more room for growth and more opportunities for differentiation in these top corners. However, the average scores are still very high, and the opportunities for differentiation, well, they exist, but we probably need to make it a little bit more challenging for you. We received a lot of questions on the impact of these changes over the overall scores and how can they be interpreted and what do they mean and how can they be reflected in the communication with investors. And so in preparation of this event and this conversation, we prepared a contribution of analysis to see to what extent did the indicators that were removed, the indicators that received a new scoring weight, or the indicators that were added to the assessment contribute to the 2020 score? And to what extent can we attribute an increase or a decrease in the 2020 score to an actual increase in ESG performance? And the way you should interpret these graphs is, well, if you take the 2019 scores as a baseline and try to estimate or assign the impact of indicators being removed, added, or reweighted over the overall 20 score, you see that the difference or what the gap that comes as a difference can be attributed to the ESG improvements. And in Americas, we see that despite the assessment development changes and the structural changes that we incorporated, that the overall scores are higher than last year. So we increased the baseline. We made it harder for you. We made it a bit more difficult to get a higher score. And still, on average, the 2020 score is higher than last year, on average. I know that doesn't translate exactly the same to absolutely every portfolio that participates, but these are average scores. More insight on this will be shared on the GRESB Insights and on our website. If you have any other questions, we're happy to attend to them. And if you need more information about this analysis or anything else, we're happy to share. Now, in terms of individual aspects and issues or topics that are evaluated as part of the assessment, we see that Americas is tracking the global averages. It's almost on par what we see that's happening at the global average versus the Americas average, with maybe a couple of very small exceptions. Now, ultimately, the goal would be to try to make this this windrows, as we call it, completely green and expand the averages as close to 100 as possible. And we see that still the biggest room for improvement and the biggest opportunities come from the performance side, and particularly asset level performance elements, mainly energy consumption, carbon, water, waste, building certifications. The management component and elements that have to do with the governance of sustainability and social elements are becoming part of the status quo and of common practice. I heard this expression a few times being used in our panels from previous events. The management component and the management bits almost become like a hygiene factor in the whole ESG equation. And more that is the case, which is a very positive signal. It means that the new baseline and the new common practice that's being observed, at least from the perspective of GRESB, is a much higher level of awareness, action, and performance being taken compared to 5 years ago, or perhaps 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when GRESB was set up. With the information and the volume of information that comes from participants comes also access to additional insights and more information. And one of the things that was introduced and that we presented to everyone that participated in the performance component this year is a new generation of performance insights into the benchmark report. More specifically, because in 2020, everyone reported their energy, carbon, water, waste data at the asset level, we were able to calculate or define a first version of intensity calculations for energy, carbon, and water, which are not currently used for scoring purposes or benchmarking purposes, but are presented to you in order to get feedback, have a starting point and an actionable starting point for engagement, with the intention of perfecting these calculation methodologies to a point where they can be used for scoring and benchmarking purposes, if not next year, in a couple of years, 3 years, depending on, well, what you as an industry think we should do and how fast we should move. And what I wanted to present on this slide is really what we see on a regional and global level in terms of energy intensity values. In teal green, as we call it, you have the averages for Americas relative to the number of assets that were used to calculate the averages versus the global averages. Something I do have to mention is that in order to calculate an intensity value, we only look at assets with 100% data coverage. And we know that data availability remains an issue in the industry and remains a challenge and a focus area for a lot of our participants. Performance insights can only be calculated and reasonably used if they are based on reliable and accurate data. And in order to have reliable, accurate data, you need to have data. And that continues to be an issue and continues to be a challenge in this transition to measure performance. With that being said, the part where we don't need to have access to 100% data coverage does have to do with, well, with the like-for-like metrics. So if we look by comparison, how did the Americas market compare against itself a year prior versus the global averages? we see a positive trend both on the America side and the global side, with steady reductions both in energy and carbon emissions on a year-on-year basis. We call what you see the icons at the bottom of the slides. The left ones are for Americas, the right ones are for the global averages, well, you see that on a like-for-like basis, assets in Americas, so assets that were included in the portfolio for 24 consecutive months, reduced their energy consumption by 1.58% relative to a 2% average on a global basis. And you could argue, well, maybe that's not enough, or that's not a lot. Perhaps it's not enough. I think we need to debate this, but it's still a positive trend. And obviously, this whole conversation will need to be reframed in the context of COVID for next year, which is obviously something we want to engage with you on. I don't see the chat and the Q&A section right now, but I think it's a good time to encourage you to ask questions. If there are any relevant questions then that you think I can pick up as I go along, I'm happy to do that as well. I know the group likes to be proactive, and we can also have a dialogue going through the slides. Otherwise, we can have some questions at the end.
We've got good banter happening, and some of the staff are in there. Charles is doing a great job, so let's keep pressing ahead. I don't think there's any pressing questions that I can see yet.
Okay, great. Well, then we can look towards the future and look forward and talk about what are the key ESG trends and what are the top of the mind focus areas for participants as well as investors. And we spent a lot of time this year talking about resilience, talking about ways in which we minimize risk in portfolios and how GRESB captures that dynamic. Perhaps it's also because in 2020 we celebrated the 3-year anniversary of our resilience module, which also means that we're at the end of its bandwidth in its current format with the assessment. The resilience module was available for 3 consecutive years on a voluntary basis, and in 2020 we saw a very good representation and very good participation from the industry on this module. Now, what comes next is yet to be fully determined. This is what we're working on right now, and we'll need to get back to our governance groups and engage with our governance groups to really define the format and the way that some of these indicators will be incorporated either through the real estate assessment, infrastructure assessments, or perhaps in a different format next year. What we do know is that we've observed and we've evaluated the data reported and the input provided over the last 3 years through the resilience module, and we've identified some of the key areas that have to do with resilience, climate change, and the road to a decarbonized economy, which is increasingly and systematically the focus of a lot of investor groups. We see pressure from regulation to achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We see a lot of regional and local initiatives that support those global goals. And we see frameworks coming together to help both the institutional investor community as well as the managers to create common pathways towards achieving those goals. Looking at our data in 2020, we saw a total of 4 reporting entities operating at net zero at the moment. So 4 entities out of 1,300. We could do the math, but the percentage is very low. you could say it's a start. I think it's definitely an encouraging start. I also think we're going to see much more activity towards that next year and the coming years. And we see great examples and a lot of focus and effort being put into this with some of the Oceania managers, as well as with some of the European managers.
While you're on this one, there is a question here that sort of talks about this. And the question, some of the questions are very detailed, and I think that we're going to have to answer those more specifically in written form. But this one's interesting. Does GRESB compare the realized energy intensity reductions with the targets that the funds have set for themselves?
That is a very good question. No, we don't right now. And I don't want to think of limitations or only put limitations on the table. I think that's certainly something that we can investigate and do more with. Progress against the targets can be calculated, can be estimated the moment you know very well what the target is, what's the baseline, and what's the duration or what's the target's deadline for that target. You can have targets imposed at portfolio level. A lot of our participants have targets imposed at the organization level, so at the manager level. You can have reduction targets, or you can have improvement targets, which could be inverse. So some managers have a target on a percentage of renewable energy consumed or generated. Others have simply on the reduction of carbon emissions. That's not something we measure right now, simply because of the complexity of the issue. But we would love to investigate to what extent that is something we should incorporate or do, and whether or not that's something that should account towards the overall score.
Perfect.
And also what type of behavior would be incentivized with that. It's easy to achieve a not so ambitious target and then claim that you achieved that target. Would that encourage organizations to set up less ambitious targets than they would otherwise do? I don't know, but certainly a question worth asking. But the road towards decarbonizing economy goes hand in hand with another emerging topic, and something that comes up more and more often, which is embodied carbon. Embodied carbon accounts for somewhere between 25 to 50% of the overall carbon emissions in the building life cycle. And as of now, there isn't any strong or systematic framework that can be used in order to calculate embodied carbon altogether. This year, we introduced a non-scored indicator in the development component to sort of test the waters and get some insights from participants whether or not they calculate the levels of embodied carbon and how. And the interesting results reflecting Americas is that only 8% of the development entities in Americas have assessed embodied carbon in one of their projects over the last 3 years. In turn, or by comparison, in Oceania, the percentage is 42%. So we see some important regional differences here. Again, this was not something that was scored in the assessment, but certainly an area that we want to investigate further and reflect better in our future assessments. And since we talk about the future and what we have in mind, we wanted to give you a brief intro with what we're currently working on and what we're busy with. And I alluded to some of the focus points for the next period. We've embarked on this transition to measuring performance for a few years now, and a lot of that started with the introduction of asset level reporting a few years ago. At first, it was voluntary, completely voluntary. Then it was incentivized through scoring, and in 2020, that became mandatory for everyone. And that is because the start of any measure and systematic evaluation of asset and portfolio performance starts with access to comparable and accurate data. And with data, to begin with, data availability. Now, we have the level of, we have the necessary level of granularity in order to implement proper quality control processes. A lot of that started in 2020. A lot of points of improvements were identified, and this is an area that we're focusing on right now. So we know that there are things that we can do differently and better, and what we prioritize for next year and the coming years, because we know that, again, proper data is the baseline and the necessary requirement to be able to calculate intensity values in order to apply proper normalization factors, and ultimately in order to do proper asset level benchmarking and portfolio level benchmarking, either or both in absolute terms, so benchmarking against regional or local, regional and global targets, or in relative terms, benchmarking against similar assets, similar portfolios with the same characteristics, same sector, same region, or perhaps both. And to the question that came up earlier, performance against targets, I think it's also an interesting question to ask who imposes these targets, because some of the targets are imposed by the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Those are global targets that ultimately the entire industry needs to aspire to and adhere to. And a lot of the work that we do, not necessarily in the assessment right now, but in separate projects like the Carbon Risk Real Estate Monitor, is to define those global targets and the proper decarbonization pathways that need to be followed in order to achieve that net zero standard. Obviously, we can't do this alone, and we won't do this alone. And we're very glad to be able to share with you some of the work that we've been busy with over the last year. And that is the new GRESB setup, the new GRESB structure, the introduction of the GRESB Foundation, which will be set up towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, with a main focus to formalize the industry engagement, formalize and strengthen the way that the standards are being developed in order to properly and accurately reflect the investor perspective. Will remain an investor-led initiative, and the investor perspective drives a lot of what we do. And we know that sometimes that's not completely aligned, or that creates some tensions with the manager perspective, but we absolutely need that as well in order to define the proper metrics. So a lot of the work that the GRESB team will be doing over the next period is to formalize these processes, and is to formalize the trajectory and the way that we engage with everyone going forward. I know that a lot of people from the line have been working with us either through governance groups or more informally through other formats. We look forward to working with you going forward. And the new setup doesn't mean that your role will be reduced or changed. It just it's on the contrary. Your contribution, well, it's formalized and recognized, and very much something that GRESB aligns with. And on the other hand, GRESB BV as an organization will continue to operationalize the standards, implement the standards that come out of the foundation through proper scoring, benchmarking, and insights. And so, before I wrap up, just a few items, just a few topics that we'll be working on over the next months. Of course, we're very pressured, and we have a limited amount of time during which we should engage, and we need to talk to you about ways in which we will account for the impact of COVID on building performance in 2021. I remember there was a time, I think in March, April, when we were hoping COVID would be just a passing event of a couple of months, maybe a few weeks, and then it would all go away. Well, here we are in December. I think it's fair enough to say that COVID will not disappear in the next few months. And so we have to deal with the aftermath of lagging effects of a pandemic that obviously has very important impacts on how assets operate, not just with regards to the 2020 reporting cycle, but also more long term. Apart from that, or related to this, a lot of the work obviously is related to this transition to measuring performance, and the definition of assets performance and portfolio performance is still in flux, or is not completely defined yet. And I think based on the feedback and the comments that we've received a lot over the last weeks, this is something that the industry needs more clarity on. What do we understand by a well-performing asset? What do we understand by a well-performing portfolio? Who should define that, based on what? And can we all have a common understanding of the transition pathway and the speed of change that is required in order to achieve our common goals? And with that, I will wrap up. Normally, if we were in an in-person event, this is the moment where we would have a big round of applause and a big moment to celebrate our leaders. I will say I'm on the right side of time zone differences. It's actually already past 5:30 in the afternoon, so I will have a glass of wine after this to celebrate everyone. For you, I think it's a little bit too early, but still. We would like to congratulate our sector leaders from this year. You've all done a fantastic job, and you are innovators, not only in this region, but globally. You are the companies that a lot of others look for inspiration and insights. And you've definitely demonstrated once again that that innovation can happen, and there's still a lot of room for improvement. So thank you for your contribution and your leadership. I would also like to say that we have many more examples of innovation and leadership that are not on the screen, but the rules of sector leaders are the rules of a competition. Well, perhaps in future years, this slide will include many more logos. Dan, over to you.
Roxana, you did a great job. Thank you so much for the informative and insightful presentation. Many of the questions that were rolling in were answered within minutes after after the question arrived. So well done. To the extent that the questions weren't specifically answered, we will publish some documentation on those. Some of the questions were very specific, so please look for that. Can you perhaps move to the next slide for us, Rox? Okay. Because this is what we have next. We have our ESG All-Star Face-Off, Team Canada versus Team US. And again, let's face it, we've all had this long 2020. So I thought it would be very nice as we bring this year to a close, that it's definitely time to mix some ESG, some serious ESG business with a dose of friendly competition. So drawing upon years of fierce yet understated rivalry between these two bordering countries, GRESB is boldly stepping forward by tossing ESG into the competitive arena. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to see the assembled group of ESG All-Stars, right? And they rival from around the globe in their collective action to drive organizational change and industry progress. So Sasha and Anna will take down the slide and start to bring forward our team. And I'll describe what the concept is here today. It's designed just like a hockey game. The sport of Canada, 3 periods. Each period begins with a face-off trivia question. The winner of the face-off goes first. Each player can answer one of 2 questions. And maybe, Rox, since the slide is up, you can move to period 1 and we can get the crowd to see. Yes, there we go. So these are the questions that will be that await the teams. So each player can answer one of two questions. Then, once they answer, they can call on somebody from the other team, and back and forth it goes. Send back to the opposite team and back and forth and back until the questions are answered by everyone on the team. Any stop and play, whether it's for a penalty, for icing the puck out of play, requires a new face-off trivia question. So each period has a theme. Period number 1, past ESG efforts. Period number 2, present ESG accomplishments. And the final period, future ESG objectives. This hockey-inspired face-off features Kingset Capital, RioCan REIT, and Oxford Properties Group. I'm going to let each group, each person introduce themselves in just a moment. And then Team USA is anchored by Harrison Street, MetLife, which we just saw as a sector leader, along with the anchoring of Kingset on the Canadian team, and DWS. So the referees and also providing color commentary will be myself and Brad Doxter. So with that, let's move to Kit. Kit, please introduce Kingset and yourself and tell us how things are going on the ESG front for you.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Roxana, for that presentation. My name is Kit Mills. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Kingset Capital. Kingset Capital is a private equity firm focused on real estate ownership, development, and management in Canada. I am responsible for developing and rolling out our ESG strategy, incorporating new aspects and ensuring that we get total buy-in from our stakeholders internally and externally.
Excellent. Yes, go ahead, Radhima.
Hi, everyone. I am Radhima Nair. I lead the sustainability program at RioCan. As you all know, RioCan is one of Canada's largest REITs that owns, manages, and develops retail-focused mixed-use properties located in major markets of Canada. Sustainability is a key business priority at RioCan, and we as an organization feel that it is our responsibility to embed ESG considerations into our decision-making at all stages of an asset class.
Excellent. Daryl.
All right, thanks very much, Dan. And hey, listen, I love the creativity here, and I've taken the opportunity to wear my my Maple Leafs jersey. I don't know if you can see it, but the slightly tortured organization, but my beloved Leafs. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Oxford Properties. My name is Daryl Nate. I'm responsible for driving our sustainability strategy, programs, and reporting for Oxford. For those of you that aren't familiar with Oxford, Oxford's a global investor, developer, and manager with our headquarters in Toronto and a portfolio of over 100 million square feet globally across office, retail, industrial, multi-residential, and hotels. Oxford is wholly owned by OMERS, the pension plan for Ontario's municipal employees, and we believe in taking a leadership approach to sustainability to create value and drive returns for our stakeholders.
So Brad, what do you think of Team Canada? I mean, these guys are strong. All of them are 5 stars and leaders in their own right.
Well, listen, the NHL, the Conn Smythe Award is rarely gone to somebody outside of Canada. So, you know, America's got a big road to hoe here. So let's see what the Americans can bring on.
Jessica, that's yours cue.
Great, thank you, Dan. Hi, this is Jessica Lengical. I am head of corporate strategy and M&A at DWS Group for a 700 billion euro global investment manager. And we have a 58 billion euro direct real estate business. Actually, right before the end of the delivery of the GRESB mission, I switched over roles to my current role. But previously, I headed up our ESG strategy for our alternatives business. DWS, we take ESG very seriously, and I'm proud to say that our real estate business is one of the leading groups within the organization that has put ESG at the forefront. This year, actually, we submitted 15 different GRESB submissions, so it's a very busy year for us, but very happy to be part of this group. Go Team USA!
Good work, Jessica. Jill.
Hi, everyone. I am here representing USA. I have my Blackhawks, and I've done so much knee hockey during this pandemic that you have my stick with me. So it has to pay off for something. But my name is Jill Brosig, and I am the Chief Impact Officer for Harrison Street. And for those of you who don't know, at Harrison Street, we are an investment manager. We focus exclusively on alternative real assets. We do have an infrastructure side, and then on the real estate side, the types of assets that we invest in are senior living, student housing, medical office, storage, life science. So what you might think of might be a little bit more niche categories. And then Chief Impact Officer, what does that mean? Well, what my role is, and I have a very talented team that works with me on this, is what we're responsible for is the overall strategy, the execution, the reporting, and the promoting of not only the impact on the world that the firm has, but all of our assets. So I'll stop at that.
Beautiful. Jim, you got us into this mess. You hosted game one at the joint venture that you have with Norges at 55512. Say hello to everybody, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Really happy to be here. So Jim Landau, I'm with MetLife Investment Management. MetLife, we sell insurance. If anybody needs life, auto, home, see me in the chat room. On the investment management side, we manage an equity, a debt, and an agricultural platform. We've got about $25 billion in equity that we own, that we're managing and own. About $21 billion in agriculture. We're the largest ag lender in the U.S. after the U.S. government, and we've got about a $71 billion commercial mortgage portfolio. After a career in asset management, where I also, sort of dabbled in the ESG world, I'm now full-time as of the last month or so as the first ever at MetLife Investment Management, Director of ESG, overseeing all three of those portfolios.
Congratulations on that, Jim. Brad, what do you think of Team USA?
Strong team. I mean, the history tells you that the American cities and American teams win the Stanley Cup, but it's the Canadians who are always the MVP. So let's go to it and see what happens.
All of them here with us today are 5 stars in their own right. So with this, we're going to drop the puck with the first face-off question. Is everybody ready? What is the best Canadian rock band of all time?
Rush.
Oh, winner. All right, Jill, you go. Okay, so the question's on the table. Most important lessons learned around ESG in your firm's GRESB journey, or what key accomplishments are you most satisfied with?
Oh, goodness. Well, let me start maybe with the lessons learned. I love, kind of just sharing information. I love being able to share with folks on kind of, being transparent on maybe where we've had some issues in the past. And I would say that when we first heard about GRESB, it was some European investors came to us and asked what our GRESB score was. This was back in 2013. And honestly, we didn't even know how to pronounce it. We were pronouncing it GRESB. So we, kind of had to learn about how to pronounce it and went in, and it really, we did it the first time. And I will say our score was, well, it was horrendous. It was really bad. And what was so powerful about it is it really gave us the opportunity to see where can we improve? What can we do? And it really helped us put together a very formal strategy, put together a formal team, and really kind of lead us. It was a tool. It was a wonderful guideline, and it still is today. It's a wonderful benchmark over the past 7 years or so that we've been using it. And I think what it also has been doing is it's really, it's a lagging metric, obviously, because it tells you how you perform from the year before. But I think what it's really opened up for us is it allows us to think about where are some of the areas that we can really differentiate ourselves. And this might bleed a little bit into kind of the second question that you have up on the screen, but the question about what are some of the key accomplishments that we're satisfied with. I think by using something like GRESB as a tool, it had us look at our unique asset classes and really focus a lot more on the S. If you think about senior housing, if you think about student living, if you think about medical office, all of these things, there's so much on the social side. And I'm going to hold off on that for one of the later questions. But I think the thing with anybody starting in with GRESB is use it as a tool, use it as a way to kind of help you improve against yourself. And really, it's not going to tell you all the answers, but it's going to be a great guide, and use it to push yourself in terms of where you want to go with your own ESG program and how you want to differentiate yourself in the market. And also, lastly, listen to what others want, meaning your investors, the partners you're working with, your employees. Do those materiality surveys to truly understand what's important, because you can't do everything. Do the things that really are going to set yourself apart. So with that, I'll take
Team Canada. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, let me kick the puck over to Daryl.
All right, thanks very much. So I'm going to go into the lessons learned, take a little bit of a different tack, but three comments. The first one around, I think your organization's DNA and culture really matters. Sitting as a sustainability point person in an organization, you really get to see and learn a lot about your organization's DNA, the purpose, the beliefs, the culture, the risk tolerance. And ESG and sustainability really challenges organizations to think more broadly and differently, and often with a lot more uncertainty around issues they're not that comfortable with. So, when I think about our journey at Oxford, our purpose is clear. We're here to drive social and economic growth through real estate, creating a better world for our customers, our partners, our communities, and the environment. We also have strong beliefs as a company. We believe in exploring, challenging, pioneering, and leading. We believe in unconstrained thinking. We know we need to act and drive positive change and act differently and evolve our business model. We know that value comes across in a number of different ways, and we think about it in different ways. Financial value, community value, personal value, all for our stakeholders. And so I think really the first lesson that I thought I'd mention, in terms of our journey and what I've seen, the DNA of your organization, your culture really matters, and will drive where you can get to. Second thing is, I think it really comes down to, stretching and going as far as your imagination will take you. I think it's a key question with sustainability. How ambitious and resourceful are you? How high do you want to aim? How creative are you, and how hard are you willing to work? Similar to a lot of things in life, but I really do think that it comes down to people within your organizations, and really what's the most important driver for success around ESG and sustainability. I'll just provide a couple of examples, tangible examples from our experience. The first one was our carbon target. A couple of years ago, we needed a new carbon target. We were on our third one as an organization. So we set a target to reduce our emissions by 30% by 2025 off a 2015 base year. And that was across our global portfolio, all asset classes. It seemed like a really high mountain at the time to climb. I'm pleased to say we're at minus 23% right now on our way. A little bit good and a little bit lucky to get there. Second example, renewable energy. Our team really did believe that we wanted to stretch a little bit further and learn and grow around on-site renewable energy. We started with on-site with our large shopping centers. And really our efforts in this area spawned out of a major expansion to one of our malls at Yorkdale Shopping Center. We had a green roof bylaw, and we traded off some solar. Project was completed on time, on budget, and really we learned a lot and challenged ourselves to develop a 1 million square foot target. Developed a business model that made sense, was accretive to our returns, reduced costs for our customers, and we're sitting here today with over 200,000 square feet and over a megawatt of power that we're generating every year. And actually, we just crunched the numbers the other day. We're generating that electricity at a 5% discount to market rates for our 3 years to date, and a 20% discount to market rates in 2020. So again, a team coming together, a lot of people, really big idea, and move the needle on that. I think I'm coming up on time, so I won't talk too much about zero carbon. Suffice to say that we're developing a zero carbon office building in Vancouver. Again, I'll give a shout out to Andrew McCallum. He's a former leader within Oxford, former chair of Canada Green Building Council. Many of you on the line would know him. He had a vision, and really we're executing against that vision for the zero carbon office building in Vancouver. So the first point being really about your organization's DNA and culture. The second point really being about stretching as far as your imagination. The third point is really that I wanted to make on lessons learned is around patience and humility. Everything takes longer than you think. Driving organizational change is complicated and messy. I think we all know that, doing what we do in our organizations. It just takes time. You got to respect hierarchy and also drive across the organization with agile groups. And really humility. I think, Roxana, you alluded to it in the front in terms of our reductions. It doesn't seem like it's enough. It seems like we got a lot more to go. I think we all collectively share that. So as nice as it is to get recognition and pat ourselves on the back, I think we all know that there's so much more work to be done. So really with that, I'll just leave those first observations and pass it back over to Jill from Team USA. Sorry, not Jill. I'm going to go. The other J.
If they're all J.
We're all J's. Oh, geez. All right. Well, I got to go over to Jessica then.
Great. Well, that's definitely a hard act to follow. So thank you for that, Daryl. And I have to echo a couple of your points here. I think the first one for us, one of the big lessons learned was that it does, It does take a while because when you really want to do it right, you have to go beyond the policies to really looking in the data, really figuring out an implementation model that is scalable. We have a massive portfolio of a very different set of assets across a global stage. So for us, it was important that we are consistent, that we can do something that we can actually roll out across the business, and that we can take the entire business along with the journey. I think the second point is around winning hearts and minds. We know that in our organization, people are in different stages of the journey, to people that embrace, to the skeptics. And for us, it's important that everybody's moving in the right direction. Sometimes that's a carrot, sometimes it's a stick that you use. But at the end of the day, we want people to be saying the same thing, that ESG is beneficial, that it helps to enhance the returns for the business, and it fits deeply into the culture of our organization and the commitments we have to our local community and to society as a whole. So I think those are the things that we've really tried to bring together over the past couple of years to make ourselves successful. And I think in terms of accomplishments, I think it is the innovation. That's what's really exciting to me about the ESG, like where ESG can go, where it can go in real estate. So some of the innovative projects that we've been able to do in the past, we're moving, for instance, in our Nordic portfolio towards being net zero on those assets. And that's a combination of both, looking at the energy efficiency improvements, doing the right things there, as well as adding on, the on-site, additions of renewables, procuring renewables, and looking at ways in which the entire utility network will be switching to renewable resources in the future. So I think being able to take those pilots and use that as a blueprint to be able to scale it across the portfolio has been very important. I think the other thing that we were very proud of was our carbon reduction goal, which we put in place in our European office portfolio in 2019. And I think, again, oftentimes you don't have perfect information when you put the goal in place, and it was definitely a win hearts and minds to get people to think that we could. Our goal is 50% carbon reduction by 2030 for our office portfolio in Europe, and also a commitment to net zero for the entire portfolio by 2050. And so when you start with that journey, you don't really know what 2050 looks like. But as you make the commitment and as you start to take the steps along the way, it starts to become a little bit clearer. So I think it's important to, for the organizations to take this lead, because it's important for our global commitment to climate change. So with that, I think I will hand it back to Ridhima for the next answer.
Thanks, Jessica. I think I would love to reiterate some of these points. Daryl started off and Jill started off great. They spoke so much about culture, and definitely culture is a big thing. Sustainability journey at RioCan started, I would say, slightly later than everyone else's situation. It started in 2016, establishing up 3 pillars on sustainability, environmental, community, and people leadership. Like, we were doing a lot of community work all this while, but I think it was about embedding that culture within the organization from top to bottom. And funny enough, ESG for our senior management was equal to doing GRESB. It's like, let's do GRESB, let's figure out what GRESB means. And I think that's how our ESG program will move on. So definitely, I think GRESB has a big role to play in terms of framing our whole framework and strategy around ESG. And for our organization, it was always about E and G, big on G because we are a REIT. But I think the S component got highlighted during COVID. So I think S was always there, but now suddenly it's become like the most important thing. Ensure our tenants are fine, ensure our employees are doing well during these COVID times. So it's an interesting transformation to see from how the culture is changing and how everyone's just thinking about ES and G all throughout this journey. I think that's one. And I think the other thing, as part of lessons learned, I would say, is there are no shortcuts. we tried, because we had to do this fast, we had to get to a certain level. We had to constantly focus on training the entire organization. Like we tried implementing some of our trainings, like literally one training in one for the entire property ops. It didn't really work. It wasn't effective. In 2019, we did one-on-one property trainings, like property managers. We spoke with them, had one-on-one conversations, figuring out what their hurdles were, and then we realized that every building is unique, every profile needs help. And I think that was one of the big lessons learned, saying no shortcuts, do it the right way. So I would say, like, from measuring year-over-year stats to managing impacts, returns, impact on stakeholders, reiterating to what Jill mentioned, is like, do your materiality, find out what your stakeholders need, was one of the things that really drive this entire process. Like, our investors need this information, that will be published in our sustainability report. Our tenants need this. So I think engaging with all our stakeholders really helped us shape that next layer as to what is important, what should we be focusing on. And all of this has shown in our impressive GRESB results. Like within 4 years, we have made huge progress, I would say. And I would say that the only reason we were able to do that was because we embedded this ESG culture within the entire organization, had so many collaborative initiatives with our, you talk about the finance team, we had our green bonds come up. We worked on a green bond framework. We worked with our ops team on various ESG initiatives. Then obviously we worked with lots of external partners to get to where we are. Not to forget, Daryl, I still recall the first time I've seen solar panels during my, educational times, but I was there to see how Oxford implemented the solar panels on Scarborough Town Center, which was a great experience, great learning experience. And I think that teaches us that ESG spirit, that there is competition, but there's healthy competition and there's collaboration within the industry. Let's learn from each other and find ways to effectively move this industry forward.
You guys are doing a great job at RioCan. You really are. Keep it up. Okay. I think we're to Jim.
Yes.
Jim, you get the puck.
Over to you, Jim.
So listen, lots of great responses already from everybody on both sides of the border. Thank you for that. Quick point I also want to make. I think for me and for probably many of us, like the words LEED and Energy Star, we're not something we ever thought about or even heard about until like 2005, 2006, thereabouts. During that 15-year period, the number of Americans in the NHL increased from 26 to 38%, and the number of goals scored by Americans increased from 23 to 39% of all North American goals in the NHL. So I just want to point out that our progress has been really dramatic on the ice. Okay.
Jim, this is a warning. Next shot, and giving them the business in the corner, you're going to the penalty box. We got to stick to the questions here. Come on, Jim.
So look, I'm just going to wrap up by really just highlighting a few of the things that everybody's already said. Redeem, you talked about stakeholders, critical. Your tenants, your investors, your partners, your employees, right? Two other things I'm going to just hit on. Jill, you talked about you talked about the progress of the importance of GRESB results, right? And I agree with you 100%. It's also driven our program in many ways in the last several years. But the key thing that my takeaway would be, and that I would want to pass on, it's all about data. Results are great, the ends are great, but it's the means of how you get there, and that takes a lot of time. It's taken us years to get our data where we want it to be. We use that data for, we use it, like many other people, for Energy Star and for DOE reporting and certainly for GRESB reporting. And, we did very well, on the performance score this year. we take a lot of pride in that, not because of the score, but because we've spent so much time working on our data, both getting it and cleaning it up. And it's non-stop. It never stops, the process. We're constantly looking for holes in the data, cleaning it up. So it's really, the devil's in the details, right? And then the last point I'm going to make, follow up on Daryl, what you were talking about. You talked about value and how ESG equates to value. I agree 100%. And I'm going to boil it down to risk. Value and risk are tied. The cap rate, your cap rate is essentially your NOI divided by value is NOI divided by a cap rate, which is derived. If you don't have a strong ESG program that's doing the heavy lifting, that's going to help you achieve the results, then you've got risk that your tenants are not going to, stay, or you're not going to attract them. Risk that you're going to lose investors or not attract those new ones. So, that would be how I would recap the period, Dan. Data and risk.
Strong close. All right, Kit, bring us home.
Boy, remind me never to be last on a panel of 6 ESG leaders. So not to redo because there's some key points that just keep coming up. It's the people, it's the culture, it's getting buy-in. It's ESG, a successful platform and strategy isn't something that can work from within a silo. It's as much a bottom up as a top down program that you need buy-in to. You need your external stakeholders to be on board with it as well. Your investors, your vendors, if you're developing, your contractors, your construction workers. Where we've found the greatest growth has been in cleaning up our data. Like Jim has said, the data is such a key aspect. If you don't have high quality data that you can trust in, you can't set targets, you can't measure performance, you don't know where you're going and how effectively you're getting there. So I put data as one of the most important building blocks to a successful ESG strategy and program. GRESB has 100% been our barometer in developing our ESG platform. You can literally take the survey and start building out what you need from it, and that will cover your A to Z aspects, from everything you need from the property level to the management policies, the framework, finding senior management leaders for your ESG, setting up internal committees. So I would really stress, if you're just beginning your ESG journey, or you're 1 or 2 years into it, really follow the GRESB framework. And that's not a planted question. I wasn't paid to say this by Dan or Roxanne. That's just the truth of it. And it's because a global group of companies have come together to shape this framework and this standard. And that's why it's so strong. That's why we keep coming back every year to it. Just quickly, a couple of key accomplishments is, in the last 2 years, KingSett has had a strong acceleration in our ESG focus. And we were successful in certifying the largest Canadian office building to a zero carbon standard, where that building is going to be fully electrified within the next 16 months. And that's a 1.5 million square foot building. So it was a huge achievement by both the property teams and the senior management to want to put that focus on carbon going forward. The other thing that KingSett's really focused in doing is investing in sustainable and innovative solutions that are really focused to reduce risk, improve our environmental impact, and enhance our communities. And one of the sexier, I guess, things within ESG that we're kind of looking at for this is the concept of vehicle to grid. So using your electric vehicles during the day to draw power and supply energy into a building to shave some peak demand, and then recharging those at night when there's a lot of excess energy in the market that's not being utilized. So better using the energy we're already making but not using. So that's just kind of one example of something that KingSett's focused on working on.
Holy cow. Kid, great answer. We've had so little prep for this that was truly amazing. Brad, what do you think? I mean, it seems like we're at a 3-3 tie at intermission here in the first period.
Dan, I completely agree. Big offensive showdown, 3-3. The state of play was very slow because there were so many goals and we had a lot of stoppages. And I think we're expecting a very defensive sort of second period where it's going to go much quicker.
Well, I think there's going to be some focus on the yes. All right. Now, Brad, are you ready to drop the puck on the next period? I'll list the questions. Would think? Okay. So the questions for period number 2, right? It's all about the present. What's easy? What are you finding easy? And what are you finding difficult from at your firm around ESG right now? And the other question is describe the most successful ESG programs and initiatives that underpin your strong performance on GRESB in 2020. Brad, do you have a question for the face-off?
Well, I really just have an observation, Dan. I think what we're expecting to see here is a much shorter shifts, 30, 40-second shifts here on and off the ice. So let's take it right to the second period.
Great. Okay, so here's the first question. What was the first capital city in the United States?
Philadelphia.
All right, winner. Go ahead.
Okay, so easy. Surprisingly easy. GHG emissions, tracking them and paying for RECs and offsets. We can get more into what we're doing and why we're doing it later maybe, but we've started a program to achieve carbon neutrality in 3 of our largest funds, all GRESB funds this year, and we're finding it surprisingly easy to track our emissions and to achieve carbon neutrality in year 1.
Excellent.
And I'm just to say difficult finding time and resources. We've got a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives, and there's just not enough hours in the day, honestly. Next.
All right. Well, here, let's just do a face-off every time. Okay, so we've got GHG emissions easy, finding the time is difficult. Okay, next question. Who is the host of Hockey Night in Canada?
Daryl's on mute, doesn't count.
Ron McLean, did I miss it?
No, you got it.
You still got it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, all right, well, that's good. All right, easy. I would say strategy. We have a clear strategy, well accepted, bought in through the organization, our co-investors, our customers, understand it, our execs, our employees. Data has gotten easier, but to Jim's point, it's a never-ending exercise and it is hard. Continues to be hard to get right, but we have got onto a global platform and gotten high quality, relevant, timely data that we never had before in the last couple of years. Great partners out there. We work with a lot of partners. And, I would also say in terms of easy is, I would agree with Jim in terms of getting the emissions and counting. On the hard, I want to acknowledge the market very quickly. Obviously a very, very tough time for all of our businesses right now. I think what's really hard is trying to figure out how we create places that people want to go, not have to go, because people have seen a different approach. So I think that's really hard. Well-being is tied to that. What do we do? There's a lot of standards, there's a lot of technologies out there. What do we do with common areas? How do we make our buildings more enticing? How much do we invest? How much do we change? I think there's a lot there. Renewable energy would be the last point I would say. On the on-site renewable energy, access to capital has gotten tighter and tougher. On the offsite, on the on-site, if we wanted to go third-party capital, tying up our roofs for 20 years is tough as well. On the offsite, getting people comfortable with PPAs and VPPAs is still tough. Carbon offsets, I think we need to go there to get to zero carbon buildings, but I think it's still a hard road, and there's still a lot of learning and a lot of people that we need to bring along the journey. I'll stop there and pass it over to Jill. You want to go next?
Sure, I can go next. I'm actually going to talk about the second question, which was some of the most successful ESG programs and initiative that we've done. So I want to focus on the S. S is really important to us given the sectors we serve. Again, student housing, senior living, medical offices. So we're taking this 3-pronged approach to health. If I talk about S, and I'm just talking about the health and wellness piece there. So the 3 pieces are, number 1, pursuing certifications. So we've already committed that we want to roll out, for example, FitWell certification across our portfolio. We were actually the first to do it in both senior and student, and we actually partnered with the organization that are the purveyors of Fitwell to actually develop a senior living scorecard. Believe it or not, that wasn't something that they had. So that's we're really excited about in the certification. The second thing is really creating unique relationships with industry leaders. So we were the first that represented the senior housing industry to join the Delos and Mayo Clinic's Well Living Alliance. And we're partnering with them as well as the Kogod Center on Aging to put together collaborative studies that we're going to be doing in our communities to better understand how the indoor environment impacts aging, which I think is really cool. And the third thing is we're investing in cutting edge technologies. We've invested in, this is actually a Toronto-based company, but we invested in an AI tool that uses narrative language to be able to predict one's cognitive health. So it can help caregivers, for example, in a senior living home, know if someone is on the path for dementia, about to fall, about ready to lose their independence, so they can offer more proactive care, or in a senior living, or excuse me, a student living situation where if someone's suffering from depression or anxiety, it can alert a counselor or the school or their parents if there is some sort of, a serious issue. So in the interest of time, let me stop there and I'll throw it over to Kit.
All right, not last. I'm going to go the easy, difficult route. So easy, we found, is surveying properties and tenants, satisfaction surveys with the tenants to be able to develop tailored programs and initiatives that meet their needs and wants. You give people the opportunity and they really will give you some really strong and valuable feedback. It's all kind of about the Lean Six Sigma approach. Let your customer pull you in the direction that they want. You'll really be able to unlock some great value. On the difficult side is waste. In this drive towards a circular economy, how to really transform the way we've been managing waste historically, the figures we use to report on waste, and to get better data and to change both upstream and downstream stakeholders to, want less waste, produce less waste, and favor things that might be a little more costly but better for the overall environment. The one other challenge I see coming up right now is climate resilience, and ensuring that within any given asset, you're focusing on the right shocks and stressors that the building will face, but also making sure that you're timing it right with your implementation and not going overboard. I think there's still a lot of work that at least we need to do in understanding those nuances across our portfolio.
Excellent. Jessica, you're up.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I think just to be quick, to me, easier now is benchmarking buildings around efficiency, around carbon, around climate. Not so easy benchmarking buildings around health and wellness. So having really across a 500 500 property portfolio, what are the healthy buildings? What are the buildings? Using quantitative metrics to do that. So I think that's the new horizon. And also I think the other one difficult that I wanted to mention, because this came up as a question in the chat, it is difficult when you have portfolios, they are considerably lower scoring. And how do you convince investors to continue to respond into GRESB? And we do have a variety of different portfolios with different types of assets. So some may be more challenged to be in that top quintile versus others. But I think that the point there is that you want to be looking beyond that top level score to what you're actually seeing in the data. What can you pull from that information that'll help you to improve next year? So I think that's, we have brought a lot of, first-time investors into GRESB and work with them on how do they understand the portfolio. And we don't set them up to that high standard where they feel like they're going to be disappointed. We look at that data, we understand, we celebrate progress. And I think that's how you continue to respond into GRESB every year. And then I'll turn that over to, Jim. Maybe Jim.
Oh, we've got to go Canada. No, I think she's ready. She's got
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Jessica. I think easy, in terms of easy, I think we have quite a few points that have been covered. I think one point for us, I would say, is it was great to have joint venture partners like KingSat. They really elevated our ESG framework. They pushed us saying that, no, we need to get lead silver on this building. We need to do these things, because they were early in the game. And I think that really helps when you have your partner and collaboration within the industry. That really helps you push the ESG program to another level, especially because it's coming outside of your organization. I think difficult, definitely data, Jim, I agree. But I think the other thing we do face is the challenge around with our tenants, the retail tenants. When we are doing materiality, the corporate side of tenant organizations saying, yes, it's all about ESG, but on the field, it's difficult to connect the dots between the field, the real tenants, ops team, and the corporate side. Yeah, that's it.
Brad, you get to see a lot of folks out there. What are you seeing that's easy and difficult? And then we'll get ready for period 3.
Oh gosh, I thought I was just the referee. I didn't know I was getting questions. Easy is well. I think the hard part is actually getting started. It's actually committing the organization to actually doing GRESB and sort of conditioning the organization, getting people to buy into it, as other people have said. I don't know if there's any easy part, really. I think all of it's hard, but it's hard because there's a goal at the end that's really important. And it's important in terms of driving the value of your organizations, but also the ESG impact, the climate impact. If we don't all commit to this, in getting started, then we're never going to get to the end. We're never going to solve the problems, which are just huge problems. These are not small problems that we're trying to face, deal with. They're big problems. And so I think the hardest part is getting started and putting that ball in motion.
Perfect. All right, lightning round, period 3, top ESG trends, right? Here's the face-off question. What's the most recent year in which the Canadian team won the Stanley Cup? Whoa, stumped the crowd.
2019.
1923.
Yeah, come on.
Close, it ends with a 3.
Jim, 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah, I should probably go in the penalty box. 1993 Montreal Canadiens.
93 Montreal?
Yep. Okay.
And Dan, what was the last year that a Canadian team was in the Stanley Cup?
It wasn't Toronto, I'll tell you that.
It was not Toronto. Vancouver, 2011.
Woo, strong. We got a strong ref. Okay, lightning round, top ESG trends. Let's start with Jill. Jill, what do you think?
Well, I was actually going to pull a DC thing and talk a little bit about the impact dashboard, if you want me to talk.
Oh yeah, you should, please.
Okay, so when I say the DC thing, I mean answering a question that hasn't been asked. But what I wanted to kind of share with people is one of the things that we've been doing at Harrison Street. I mentioned in the beginning that we've had a formal ESG program for about the past 7 years, but we've been around for 15. And at the beginning of this year, we introduced this new tagline called Making an Impact. And I was, as I mentioned, fortunate enough to be awarded the title of Chief Impact Officer. And as I said, part of that role is really being able to capture what we've done and report out on what's the impact that we've had on the world. So certainly when we do our corporate impact report or our corporate responsibility report, we talk about a lot of the traditional things you'd see in ESG, a lot of things we've talked about here around energies that we've saved, or where we are in terms of not producing carbon emissions, or how much renewables we're investing in, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is in there. But what we also do is expand beyond that. So I think a lot of people, and we haven't talked about it here yet, but diversity and inclusion is a big thing that we talk about, and we report out on that quarterly on these impact dashboards. We talk about how many jobs have been created. When we make an investment, how many jobs have been created because we've done that. It's really, again, looking at the company and saying, because you've been here, because you existed, how have you, not the firm, but everything you've touched, how have you made, a change? We talk about how we're able to enhance the care that our residents are getting. We talk about how we work with research, how we work with, the certification program that I mentioned a moment ago, and really try to talk about the so what of all of this. So I think what I would share with people is, if you have an ESG program, you don't want to do things just because you're checking the box. You want to be able to go back and then say, we did this and we created this type of value, or we made this type of an impact, and really try to quantify this. We've talked about how difficult data is, and it's incredibly difficult. I come from, a technology background, so this is kind of my sweet spot, but I completely agree that it's incredibly difficult. But how do you translate so that you have something quantitative that people can say, yeah, I get it that you've made a difference, and it's not the touchy-feely thing. So I think for us, one of the exciting things that we're doing is creating these impact dashboards to promote in, not in a disingenuous way and not in a bragging way, but really a very fact-based way. Because we've existed, these are the things that we've done, and now let's push ourselves to do even more.
Jill, I'm so glad you showed me that impact dashboard. It's really strong. I do think that that is a trend going forward with our larger participant group. So thank you for answering the question that way. Well done. Canada, who goes? Don't jump at once. Redeema.
I can go.
Top trend.
Sure.
Yep.
I think in terms of top 3 ESG trends, definitely climate change is on our mind for sure. How to see, again, I just go back to collaboration. We have to collaborate with our tenants, our communities, to see how we work throughout our resilience programs and stuff like that. The other thing is ESG reporting frameworks. I think there are quite a few frameworks right now. We are scrambling, thinking GRI was there, now SASB is there, now IRC is going to be taking on as well. So I think finding GRESB does a great job of, I think, showing the different indicators, and yeah, exactly, where there are overlaps, so that we can convince some of the folks in our senior management, saying that no, we don't have to go through each and every reporting framework. Let's go through GRESB, see what are the overlaps, and figure out the way, and then definitely depends upon materiality. And the third one, again, going with what Jill said about D&I, diversity and inclusions definitely caught a lot of attention in our organization. I'm part of our council team who's looking into this. Again, we will be using some of the KPIs that GRESB highlights, also around policies and stuff like that, to ensure that D&I considerations are truly embedded within our organization.
Jim or Jessica?
I'm happy to go. So yeah, I think Jill and Ridhima captured a number of the trends. Impact to me, I think, is a big one. Really being able to measure transparent, standardized way the impact that we're creating here, so that we're, as a business, moving away from ESG and integration and into that next frontier. So I think that's one. The other one I would say is climate risk, physical climate risk, not just in terms of, are we capturing it, but are we using it in our decision making? So I think I would challenge us as an industry to say, are we really at the point where we're making decisions around this, and is that actually impacting property values in a material way? But I think there's more to come on that topic, yeah, with that, I guess I'll pass it back to the Canada side to maybe Kit.
Sure. So not to sound too repetitive, health and well-being, big trend that's coming. I feel COVID has really accelerated that in terms of people's awareness of air quality and amount of fresh air coming in. Climate resilience, just actually kind of breaking down the climate change category to 2 separate ones, carbon reduction and climate resilience, making sure your assets are resilient and have reduced their transitional and physical risks, as well as reducing carbon. The last trend I see growing, which is still kind of sitting in the shadows, is the circular economy. When we went through our achievement of decarbonizing the 1.5 million square foot office building, as we moved it towards full electrification with a low electricity emission, electricity emission, let me get this right. Low carbon emission grid for electricity. There we go. We found that about half of the building's emissions were coming from its waste. And in order to really achieve a low carbon economy, we really need to be addressing that and minimizing the amount of waste we produce to begin with.
Beautiful. Jim?
So I'm just going to throw out one thing, carbon reduction. If carbon reduction is your goal, and I think for most of us it is, or it will be, then, how you get there, again, it's like the ends versus the means. The means is devil's in the details. Efficiency. We've all been doing it for years. We need to step up the game. We really need to drive, deep retrofits and figure out, stupid but true, cliche, the cheapest kilowatt to offset is the one that you didn't use in the first place, right? So really driving emissions, reduction. 2, on-site renewables. Many have talked about it today. This week we're commissioning in DC a 560 kilowatt solar array. I think it's the largest in DC. So we're really excited about that. We've got some other rather large projects happening in California, Massachusetts right now. So on-site renewables, pushing the envelope, what can you do there? And then finally, off-site, utility, purchasing green power, utility scale power, VPPAs. At the end of the day, what are your net emissions? And the goal, just year to year, should be, driving down your emissions, your net emissions overall by those 3 techniques, so that, if you are purchasing RECs and offsets, it's reduced year by year, and that's how I would sum up.
Jim's got the playbook on the way to net zero. Daryl, bring us home.
All right, some great points, not a lot to add at all. I had healthy buildings and inclusion and diversity on my list as well, and some really great points by others on that. I'll just try to make 1 or 2 new points under carbon, which was my third trend. I think there's just generally speaking an increased focus on carbon over energy strategically within organizations. I think there's also a key point around peak demand. It's going to matter more in the future. It's not just about how much energy we use, it's the types of energy we use, obviously, and it's when we consume the energy. So, another point is around district energy. I think it's going to play a greater role, particularly in larger community scale developments. We have a couple of those underway, taking them all from 2 million feet to 14 million feet in mixed use developments, big projects. And I think, really thinking about the play and the interplay between different types of energy, but district energy playing a big role there as well. And then the last point around, Jim, you mentioned zero carbon buildings and the approach that I think is a great approach. I think really a big issue for the zero carbon buildings, one thing we've learned in a trend is, how do you find waste heat for buildings in colder climates? How do you solve for the natural gas versus electricity conundrum, where it's usually a lot cheaper for natural gas than electricity. So just a couple other thoughts. And then the last one, I'll just wrap back from Roxana when she started the intro by talking about entity level carbon neutrality. She mentioned 4 organizations up front. I know of Sarah Neff and Kilroy, give her a shout out. I know there's others, I don't know the other 3. I know our portfolio in Australia, Investa, 2 million square foot office portfolio is committed to carbon neutrality by 2040. But I think that is also an area and a key trend as well in terms of carbon neutrality at a building level, but also at an entity level. So I'll stop there and pass it back.
Amazing. Brad, what a match. What's your takeaway, Brad? What do you think? Is there a clear winner?
Well, Dan, I want to start by saying it's not a match. That's soccer. It was a game. And I say that as a soccer guy. And I think it's extraordinary because given my soccer background, I'm going to call this a draw, and I'm going to basically put this to next year to roll over. I want to make sort of 2 interesting quick observations that I thought were really interesting, or 3 actually. One is this 6 people here represented organizations who are not thinking about GRESB as a cost, but are really thinking about how it translates into value at both the asset level and the organizational level. And I think most people come into GRESB at the beginning thinking about, I'm doing this. They're usually begrudging, but they're really thinking about how much is GRESB going to cost me. They're not thinking about that other part, the value creation. GRESB is an equalizer. It's a standardized approach to ranking organizations and portfolios against each other. But I think the more important point, which was made by a number of people, is really controlling your narrative. Once you're doing GRESB, talk about the success you had. Jill talked a lot about that with Harrison Street. What successes are you having? What are you doing that's differentiated? You're not forced to basically put yourself into somebody else's paradigm. You get to control your own paradigm, create your impact. And I think, Jill's title and the word impact is a really important one. What impact is each organization that's doing GRESB having across, their portfolios, whether it's economic and fiscal, or whether it's health and wellness, indoor air quality, things like that. I think the other point, and Daryl made this at the very end, is zero carbon buildings. There's a lot of discussion about zero carbon. Most of the discussion honestly goes to building codes, and it talks about new buildings. Having said that, the big challenge is existing building stock. And we don't talk enough about how to get existing buildings to net zero. That's going to be really important, because if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to tackle the issues that we have, if we're going to meet the metrics that we have to meet, the 2% Celsius, then we have to be talking about existing buildings over new buildings and new construction.
Excellent wrap up, Brad. So some of my points, I really liked hearing about the circular economy at the end. That was a rattler off the cage and into the goal. Good shot, Kit. And Jessica's point about physical risk and transition risk, spot on, right? That's something that we're all looking at as we navigate forward to 2025. So again, what an incredible match. Great draw by both teams. Thank you, everybody, for going a little overtime with us. I think that this is going to be one of the most watched videos on our 2020 results events when people go back to look at all of the great points that were made here. So as we close out the year, keep up the excellent work on ESG. What you do now between now and the end of the year matters. Keep it up, and we'll see you again next year with the GRESB assessment. Thanks, everybody. Have a great close to your year.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.